I'm really excited to speak with you all today about AI and the future of work. Um, Earlier this month, or actually in August, LinkedIn released a report on the way that we're seeing AI permeate across the labor market. And I'll share a bit of some insights from that. We've also recently released earlier this year a report on skills first hiring in the skills first labor market, and I'll reference some of those findings as well throughout my comments today. Um, and I maybe want to just start by saying a bit about LinkedIn has these insights and kind of where these insights come from, and I'll get into some of what those insights are. Um, as Rachel mentioned, my role at LinkedIn is thinking a lot about the labor market insights that we can provide, and those insights, in many ways, come from the fact that LinkedIn is a professional network that has over 950 million members. And when we hear about this concept of the economic graph, what we're really describing is the digital representation of the economy that comes from having 950 million members, 60 million plus companies, tens of thousands of unique skills, of unique institutions of learning on the platform, and then kind of the interactions across all of those. So we think about the millions of job postings, the skills people are adding on their profile. That is the source of the insights that I'm going to be sharing a bit with you today. There's a chat function, there's a Q&A function. Please put those your questions in there in real time. And I'll try to, if I see them pop up, I'll try to address them as I'm talking. I know there'll be plenty of time also at the end for us to kind of go through them as well. When we think about our research agenda, we think about our research agenda along a few areas. The one is as we think about all the economic trends, we wonder what they mean for equity in the economy. And to what extent are different groups, different jobs, different industries, different parts of the world impacted differently than others? Another area that we often think about, and we have a whole book of work around green jobs and green skills. I also spend a lot of time thinking about that, and I can make some comments around how those skills are showing up in the economy as well, and how those trends in green skills mirror a lot of what we're seeing with AI. And we also want to think about resilience. How do our insights inform information on career pathways, or how do we help workers and companies be resilient through different changes in the economy? So I'll start with this slide, and there's a few things I want to highlight. Before generative AI kind of became such a big part of our professional lexicon over the last 9 months, really, we were already experiencing lots of changes in jobs. So if we think about a job as a collection of skills, those jobs were already changing. We expect it to change a lot. 25% between 2017 and 2022, and 60% between 2017 and 2030. So if you think about your job today, that there 25% of those, the skills you use, you didn't use them 7 years ago. And then there's a new set of skills that we're going to have 7 years from now that we don't use today. Those skills that we're going to use in the future are more likely to be skills related to technology in general. That's always been the case. Green in general, we can talk about that if people have questions. And now AI related. And I think part of what this slide shows is that generative AI in particular has accelerated the way in which new skills are going to show up in all of our jobs. So while I think there is a lot of that comes from that acceleration, this is a process that's already been underway with our jobs all the time. And for many of you, you probably already think about how you help workers kind of respond to that changing nature of jobs in general. Another thing I'll just comment here is one thing that LinkedIn's leadership likes to remind me of is that we've been using AI tools on LinkedIn since 2007. The feature many of you may know to build your network called People You May Know, that has AI built into it. The reason I bring that up is I think generative AI has kind of brought to the forefront AI in our world much more clearly, but AI has been in the background decades. And I bring that up to say that part of what I think we should be thinking about is how do we demystify these new AI tools? But AI has been something we've been using for a long time, and we've been comfortable and perfectly okay with those use cases. And we should think about how that might inform our approach to the kind of growth of generative AI across jobs. So generative AI is on the rise, and it's on the rise in a couple of ways. But some of the ways we see that showing up on LinkedIn is just the addition of generative AI skills to members' profiles and the use of generative AI keywords in posts and in job posts. So posts on the on the platform, things you might see on someone's feed, as well as job posts. And that just says that one, workers tell us that they perceive these skills as more important to be able to succeed in their jobs. But most of these are not workers getting new jobs. These are workers doing their jobs right now who are finding ways to believe these skills are important. And so I think that's like another important element here, which is just because these skills are changing or becoming relatively more important than they might have been a year ago, or they're new, like they weren't things we were thinking about a year ago. It's not just how people get new jobs, it's also how people be successful in their existing jobs, because these skills are going to be relevant in people's jobs today. And we see that workers perceive that. And executives in the United States also see a lot of value in AI. And when I mean AI here, we're really specifically talking about generative AI. And so we see here just a lot of stats from US executives saying, we believe that AI is going to be really important, generative AI is going to be really important to our company, to our organization, to how we're going to expect our employees to do their jobs. We're going to look to unlock opportunities for greater productivity by bringing AI tools across our company. So I think that is important, because now we have to think about how do we, one, prepare workers to be learning new skills all the time. That acceleration that I showed on that previous slide indicates that we need workers to be learning new skills. And that's just going to be an important thing, part of what being a worker is. And so I think there's that element. And that's going to be important because when generative AI, as managers and leaders think about productivity, they're going to be looking for workers to be including generative AI as applicable within their role. I think the other point here I'll say is I know there's a lot of angst around what impact the use of generative AI might have on headcount, but what our data suggests is that's not that frame misses really the opportunity in reality of how generative AI is going to be kind of affecting the world of work. So these two images to me are a really interesting juxtaposition. On the left, we have the fastest growing generative AI skills, much of which are pretty technical. And we can talk about what those are, or what we can think about kind of the jobs are showing up in. And I bring that up because most of these skills are relatively new. The jobs, being an AI engineer, that's a new idea, a new job. So many of those folks were already working on software development, and they're adding kind of this set of new skills specific to the use of generative AI. And we know that titles like head of AI have been growing over the last few years. So that's what we see on the left. On the right, we see something a little different, that there's actually growth in demand for non-technical skills. These are skills that these are the things that make people human. And those skills are also going to be increasingly important as more technology gets integrated into our daily work lives. So the fact that 92% of executives think that people skills will be more important than ever, I think that is such an interesting juxtaposition to this slide, the left side of this slide and the previous slide, that talked about how bullish executives are on AI and how AI skills are growing in the labor market. What this means is, yes, we can be helping workers learn these generative AI skills as they are applicable to their job. But we also need to make sure that workers are learning and developing other skills. They're going to be really important to how they interact with other people, how they interact with technology, and kind of emotional intelligence. These are the things that are, again, uniquely human. And those are going to be increasingly valuable.
Ephraim, can I pause you for a second?
Yeah.
there's a question that will be essential to this person's understanding of what you're talking about. And it's asking if you can define generative AI and contrast that with a traditional understanding of AI.
Yeah, so I'll say caveat, I'm not an expert on generative AI, but I think when we refer to generative AI, what we're talking about are kind of where AI tools are generating new content. So I'm thinking about being able to give a prompt that you might see like in ChatGPT, and it kind of create new information. Now, there's lots of ways that could show up. So one of the ways that LinkedIn has embedded generative AI is today, if you're creating a job post on LinkedIn, we can use generative AI tools to help you write that job post. For a small business owner who, they don't have an HR team or a talent acquisition team, has got to write it, so they have to write the job post themselves. What we've learned is that could take a long time. And that's really difficult, especially if they don't have a lot of kind of the bandwidth to actually carve out like what's the latest trends on this title, what skills are most important for this title, what are the model type of applicants I'm looking for. So today you can go on LinkedIn, create a job post, and use generative AI to write that job post. Now, generative AI doesn't just write that post and then post it. It still requires a human to review the post, to create inputs around the skills that are most important to the role you're hiring for, examples of profiles of workers who might match what you're hoping to source from candidates. And so it still requires a lot of human input, but it essentially means that AI is creating some of the content based on inputs from humans.
Thanks, Efrain.
So I'll bring this quote up again. This is a quote from our CEO. But one of the things that LinkedIn's been doing a lot recently is kind of talking about how to move to a skills-based labor market, skills-based ecosystem. You all are in the workforce space. I think you are all very familiar with this concept by now. But what we're thinking a lot about is how does somebody get a job, regardless of their education background, regardless of where they may have worked, regardless of their prior title. How do you kind of showcase the skills you have? I think that also applies how you develop employees. Again, if we think about a job as a collection of skills, what that means is we need to help those workers learn the relevant skills that kind of are augmenting their job or kind of become more relevant in their job today. We can think about how my job has changed over the last 5 years. I'm sure many of you can think about how your job has changed over the last 5 years. And again, a lot of that is taking that skills-based approach. And as we think about how to invest in workers, how do we take a skills-based approach to invest in those skills that are most important? So now what we'll talk a bit about is which skills, which job types are most affected by AI. So I think it's, we think about our jobs today, and you can think about some parts of our job that generative AI will really be useful for, and others where it may not be. And I think we'll talk a bit about that and some of the jobs that are going to have kind of the most impact from generative AI. So one of the things our team did in the work for this AI report was examine which skills we believed would be impacted by AI. You can think about it across different skill groups like business, industry, communication, engineering skills, or people-related skills. I'll give you an example. So when I met Priyanka from World Education at APEC, the APEC Senior Officials Meeting in Seattle last month, which kind of was one of the reasons we're here today, I wrote my remarks, my first draft of my remarks using ChatGPT. I provided an outline of some facts I needed, and I needed some help, time-saving help really, to kind of link those facts together, to build a narrative. And that's where I kind of relied on ChatGPT. Now, I ultimately edited fairly heavily what ChatGPT gave me, but the way that I used ChatGPT in my job was to help write the first draft. When I think about articles that I want to write on LinkedIn, that's the same way I think about ChatGPT or generative AI. It gets me over the hump, of that kind of writer's block that comes. You're like, what should I write first? So at least now something's out there, I can start editing, and I find that that helps me with a velocity perspective in creating written content. So this this slide shows that we estimate that 84% of US LinkedIn members will have at least 25% of their skills impacted by generative AI. So again, if you think about your job as a collection of skills, we estimate that most workers in the United States will have about 25% of those skills impacted in some way, shape, or form by generative AI. And there's very few people for whom 0% of their job will be impacted. There's so I would kind of, everyone's going to have some impact here. Some will be bigger, some will be smaller. And here are kind of the categories we think that are going to show up in that data. So we'll say some jobs will be augmented by generative AI. And you can think about a data analyst as a good example of this, where generative AI might help them create some code to query a big database. We think about some jobs will be disrupted by generative AI. And these jobs will require a greater transition to kind of do that job in this different way that leverages generative AI. And the example we highlight here are language translators. And some jobs are fairly insulated from AI, and our data suggests that a title like real estate agent is fairly insulated. So they might use generative AI to write that marketing post that goes on Redfin or Zillow, but there's still so much that a real estate agent must do, kind of that they must do within their job. And how would they use, like, what generative AI would help them do is see which types of posts or descriptions of a property generate the most views, and that's how generative AI would be used to kind of build a data set of a model that then would help create content, that marketing post that we see when we are on Zillow, Redfin, or all those websites. We also took a look at the industry view. So which industries will we see AI have the most, or generative AI have the greatest impact on the skills of those workers? Not surprisingly, technology, information, and media is where we see the most kind of impact. However, there's other industries see greater augmentation, other industries see greater disruption. So we think this is an important way to think about where AI is going to show up, where generative AI is going to show up in those roles, in those industries, and how we can best prepare those workers. And I'll say here is a slide that kind of just goes through a variety of titles. We can pause on the slide for a moment and people can kind of take this in. I have little kids. You can see child care provider on this list. There's very little part of a child care provider's job that is going to be affected by AI. And you kind of see that reflected in the skill, in this skill here. Similarly, an oil field operator, very little that AI can do to actually run that machine, things that require someone to be on site. But then you can think about a software engineer who writes code, and we can see even ChatGPT today can write code. And so we can think about the ways that a software engineer is going to have their job impacted by generative AI, and this ways they need to retool their skill set to best leverage this technology and continue to be competitive in the field. And you also can see here which skills are most potentially kind of impacted by AI. So, for example, there's a lot of event planning that could be done. You can see that show up in the event manager example, where there could be creation of event materials and things like that generative AI can do. Because one thing generative AI can do is also create images, and that could be, designers may spend a lot of time creating images that could otherwise be created very quickly. If you think about event managers that may not be the primary purpose of their job, that may be something they spend a lot of time doing, that could be better spent doing something else that's related to kind of event management and production. I also want to talk a bit about who will see their skills impacted by generative AI the most. So we looked at this by two ways. One is age, the other is gender. And so, gender, I think the gender gap shows up so much in our data, but here is one where I think it's really interesting, which is that women are more likely to have their skills profiles disrupted by AI. And so, what do we think think about what impact the growth of generative AI is going to have on gender equality. That I think is an important lens for us to think about the interventions we might be creating to best support workers and support gender equality in the workplace. Another thing I think about is age. What we see is that younger workers are more likely to have their jobs, they're augmented or disrupted by AI. But a lot of more experienced workers will see that too. And for a lot of more experienced workers, they have to be ready to learn new skills and retool to be able to be successful. So we know that your younger workers are more likely to learn these skills because they're just digitally native. That's part of what school curricula look like today. But it's also really important that this is part of what older workers would be learning as well, if they're either through their job or through other interventions like a workforce development program. There's a lot of ways you can learn these skills, and LinkedIn and Microsoft together have been thinking about how we leverage kind of our ecosystem to support that. So one of the things that LinkedIn and Microsoft have done is created a new generative AI certificate, and that all the coursework available for that certificate and that pathway is available at no cost to anybody via LinkedIn Learning. And so I've included the link here. This is part of a broader effort called the Global Skills Initiative. The Global Skills Initiative not only has pathways for generative AI, but also learning pathways, again, available for free through 2025 at least, for a variety of in-demand jobs. And what's true about all those in-demand jobs is they are digitally enabled. So even before generative AI became such a big part of how we think about this conversation, digital skills were already really important. Whether that was being a customer service rep, project analyst, or project manager, digital skills are going to be crucial. So highly encourage you all to make use of these free resources from LinkedIn and Microsoft. And again, I'll come back to this slide around skills, because there's a few things that I take away from all of these stats. One is most people weren't AI engineers before. So yes, there's all this demand for AI skills and demand for people to work on generative AI. But the truth is we're going to have to find people from other jobs, other titles to fill those roles. And that is going to be that's skills-based hiring at its core. The other part is, as we think about how to develop workers, we need to take a skills-based view so that workers are learning the skills that are relevant for their job. I'm a non-technical person, but I should still learn some basic generative AI skills to be more increasingly productive and relevant and competitive in my job. So example of that might be a skill like prompt engineering, knowing how to write and engage with generative AI tools so that it creates the content I'm looking for. There are examples of generative AI creating things like business plans and strategy documents. These documents can take a really long time to create from scratch. And it's not that you want to just plug and play exactly what ChatGPT or another generative AI tool generates, is that it creates a way to kind of begin moving a conversation forward. And that's how I've found generative AI to be valuable kind of in my role.